The treaty signing ceremony aboard the Luminous Accord sparkled with bioluminescent grandeur. Ambassador Thyra of the Kethian Sovereignty watched the human delegation with barely concealed contempt. Their skin looked fragile as paper. Their bodies moved with none of the armored grace of her people. Everything about them screamed prey species. The alliance between the Kethian Sovereignty and Earth Coalition was only 2 months old. Thyra still questioned why her government had agreed to this partnership. The Kethians had dominated the Outer Rim through superior technology and ruthless efficiency for 3 centuries. They had never needed allies before. High Councilor Vex raised his ceremonial chalice. The elder Kethian's carapace had dulled to deep bronze with age, but his voice still carried authority through the chamber. To our unprecedented partnership with humanity, may our combined resources bring prosperity to both our peoples. The diplomats at the long table raised their vessels in unison. Thyra noticed Ambassador Chen barely touch the ceremonial drink, while the Kethians consumed theirs in the traditional manner. Another sign of weakness, she thought, unable to handle even mild intoxicants. Attaché Karn, her junior diplomat, leaned toward a human aide. Is it true what the border colonies whisper? That humans never forget grievances? That your species holds grudges across generations? The aide, a thin man named Rodriguez, smiled carefully. That depends on who you ask. Some would say we have long memories. Others would say we simply value accountability. Several humans at the table exchanged glances. Something passed between them that Thyra could not interpret. It irritated her. Every species creates mythology to enhance their reputation, Thyra said, her translator rendering her clicks and whistles into standard speech. The Draxi claim their honor cannot be tarnished. The Yulani insist their word is absolute law. Humans claim you never forget. All exaggerations designed to intimidate potential adversaries. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. High Councilor Vex's eye stalk swiveled toward her in warning, but Thyra pressed forward. I have studied human physiology extensively. Your neural architecture is inefficient compared to Kethian processing. Your memory retention degrades rapidly. Your emotional responses cloud logical judgment. The mathematics suggest you cannot maintain the vengeful focus your reputation claims. Ambassador Chen set down her glass with deliberate care. Her face remained pleasant, but something in her dark eyes shifted. You have done your research, Ambassador Thyra. That is admirable. Then you acknowledge the claims are false. I acknowledge that your analysis is thorough and logically sound. Chen's smile never wavered. I also hope circumstances never arise where you discover the gap between your analysis and reality, because such circumstances would be unfortunate for everyone involved. Thyra felt her secondary hearts quicken. Is that a threat, Ambassador? Not at all. Chen's voice remained warm, almost friendly. It is genuine concern. There's a difference between understanding something intellectually and experiencing it viscerally. I prefer you never need to learn that distinction regarding human nature. Before Thyra could formulate a response, the chamber doors burst open. A junior officer rushed in, his carapace pale with stress. High Councilor, Ambassador, priority alert from Rim Station Telos 9. Vex stood immediately. Report. The Ravagers have emerged from the dead sectors, multiple assault carriers detected. They are moving toward the civilian mining colonies in Sector 14. Estimated time to first colony is 6 days. The room erupted in controlled panic. Diplomats began speaking rapidly, accessing data terminals built into the table. Thyra felt her training override her earlier annoyance. The Ravagers were nightmares made manifest. Pirates, slavers, and worse. They had terrorized the Outer Rim for decades. How many carriers? Vex demanded. 5 confirmed, perhaps more following. Intelligence indicated they only had 3 operational in this region. Intelligence failed us. Thyra stood, her mind already calculating defense scenarios. We need to mobilize the Sovereignty fleet immediately. I will coordinate the evacuation of priority personnel. Ambassador Chen was also on her feet. The pleasant diplomat had been replaced by something harder, more focused. The Earth Coalition Battle Group Sierra is stationed 3 jumps from Sector 14. We can deploy within 4 hours. Make it 2 hours, Vex ordered. Ambassador Thyra, you will coordinate with the human forces. We need every ship available. High Councilor, with respect, should we trust such a critical operation to an untested alliance? The humans have no experience in our theaters of operation. Chen met Thyra's gaze. We are experienced enough, and we are your best option right now. Thyra wanted to argue, but the mathematics were clear. They needed ships, they needed firepower. Personal opinions were irrelevant when civilians were at risk. Very well. But Kethian forces will lead the engagement. Human vessels will provide support. Agreed, Chen said, though something in her tone suggested she was humoring Thyra rather than accepting her authority. The diplomats dispersed rapidly. Thyra found herself walking alongside Chen toward the docking ports. The human moved with surprising efficiency for someone Thyra had dismissed as soft. Ambassador, Thyra said as they reached the corridor junction where they would separate, about my earlier comments regarding human capabilities. Chen paused, turning to face her. Yes? I spoke from analysis, not malice. I hope no offense was taken. None taken. Chen's smile returned, but it did not reach her eyes. We are accustomed to being underestimated, Ambassador. It happens frequently. Just remember what I said. I hope you never see us when analysis fails, and instinct takes over. The Ravagers do not follow diplomatic protocols. They do not care about treaties or civilized behavior. If things deteriorate out there, do not judge too harshly what you might witness. Thyra studied the human's face. She looked sincere, almost worried. Ambassador Chen, I have coordinated 17 defensive operations. I have witnessed combat. I know what warfare entails. I am certain you do, Chen said quietly. But you have never fought alongside humans before. That makes a difference. A significant one. She turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing in the metal corridor. Thyra watched her go, feeling unsettled in a way she could not articulate. 5 days later, the combined fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Sector 14. What they found made Thyra's primary heart stutter. The Ravagers had not brought 5 carriers, they had brought 9, along with dozens of smaller attack craft and support vessels. The first mining colony was already under assault, its defensive shields flickering as weapons fire overwhelmed them. Thyra stood on the bridge of her command ship, the Diamond Fortress, staring at the tactical hologram with mounting dread. How did they hide 4 additional carriers from our scans? Unknown, Ambassador. Her tactical officer's voice was tight. But they are here now, and we are outnumbered nearly 2 to 1. Then, we fight smarter than them. Thyra activated the fleet-wide channel. All Kethian vessels, assume defensive formation pattern Gamma, protect the colony shields at all costs, show them why the sovereignty has never fallen to raiders. The Kethian fleet moved with practiced precision. Their ships formed elegant geometric patterns, maximizing shield overlap and firing solutions. It was beautiful, efficient, and exactly what 3 centuries of military doctrine prescribed. But the Ravagers did not care about beauty or doctrine. They swarmed like insects, throwing themselves at the defensive lines with no concern for casualties. For every Ravager ship destroyed, 2 more pressed the attack. Thyra watched the tactical display with growing alarm. They were holding, but barely. The math was against them. They needed the colony evacuated within 3 hours, but the Ravagers were not giving them that time. Then, alarms shrieked across the bridge. Hull breach detected. Sections 12 through 17. Multiple Ravager boarding parties confirmed. Thyra's world tilted. Boarding? The enemy had actually managed to board the Diamond Fortress? In her entire career, no hostile force had ever breached a ship under her command. All security teams to breach points, repel the invaders. She forced her voice to remain steady. Fight with the honor of the sovereignty. She pulled up internal sensors, watching as Kethian security forces moved to intercept. Her people were well-trained, well-equipped. They would handle this. Then she noticed something odd. The human contingent assigned to Deck 15 had not retreated to secondary positions. According to standard procedure, they should have fallen back to create a fortified line. Instead, their life signs remained stationary, directly in the path of the largest Ravager force. What are the humans doing? She clicked to herself. Attaché Karn, query the human detachment. Why have they not followed evacuation protocols? Ambassador, they are not responding to standard channels. Karn's eye stalk swiveled with confusion. But their vital signs show elevated stress indicators. They are still alive and active. On the display, the Ravager wave reached the human position. Thyra expected the human markers to vanish, overwhelmed by superior numbers. They did not vanish. Against all mathematical probability, 18 human soldiers held their ground against a boarding force 60 strong. That cannot be accurate, Thyra said. Check the sensors for malfunction. Sensors are functioning correctly, Ambassador. The humans are holding. They have been holding for 47 minutes. 47 minutes. Thyra stared at the impossible data. No force that small should survive 47 seconds against those odds, much less 47 minutes. I need to see this myself. Thyra left the bridge, taking her personal guard with her. They were the finest soldiers in her command, veterans of dozens of engagements. Their armor gleamed even in the emergency lighting. As they descended into the lower decks, the sounds of combat grew louder. Energy weapons discharge, the shrieking of Ravagers, and something else, something that sounded almost like singing. They are singing? One of her guards clicked in confusion. They rounded a corner and found a group of wounded Kethian security personnel being tended by human medics. The Kethians should have retreated hours ago per standard doctrine. Instead, the humans had stayed with them, protecting the wounded while somehow holding off a vastly superior force. A human sergeant looked up as Thyra approached. The woman was covered in burns and chemical stains from Ravager weapons. Her armor was dented in a dozen places. She had a deep gash across her neck that was still bleeding, yet she was still standing, still functional. Ambassador. The sergeant nodded respectfully. Her translator rendered the words with a slight delay. Sorry for the delay in reporting. We have been a bit occupied. Why did you not fall back? Thyra demanded. Standard protocol required immediate retreat to fortified positions. The sergeant looked genuinely confused for a moment. Then she glanced at the wounded Kethians. We could not leave them, Ambassador. They were injured. We do not abandon wounded allies. You could have died. You should have died. The mathematical probability of survival was less than 1%. Yes, ma'am. The sergeant agreed as if discussing the weather. But we did not die, and neither did they. So it worked out. One of Thyra's guards stepped forward. The human speaks truth, Ambassador. My clutch brother was on this deck. He said the humans carried him to safety while simultaneously engaging the Ravagers. He would have been captured without their intervention. Thyra felt something fundamental shift in her understanding. She looked at the sergeant with new perception. The woman was barely capable of standing, bleeding from multiple wounds, yet she had held her position for nearly an hour against impossible odds. Where is Ambassador Chen? Thyra asked. Forward position, ma'am. Holding junction point 15 Gamma. Take me there. The sergeant led them through the damaged ship. Bodies littered the corridors. Most were Ravagers, their grotesque forms piled in clusters, but some were human. Thyra counted 6 human dead, only 6 from 18. Against those odds, they should all be corpses. They reached junction 15 Gamma. Thyra stopped, unable to process what she was seeing. The corridor had been transformed into a death trap. Equipment lockers had been torn free and repositioned as barricades. Exposed power conduits hung from the ceiling like electric snares. Hull plating had been melted and reshaped into makeshift weapons. Every piece of the ship had been repurposed for killing. In the center of this improvised fortress stood Ambassador Chen. The polite diplomat from the ceremony was gone. This woman held a plasma cutter in one hand and a jagged piece of hull metal in the other. Her formal attire was torn and burned. She had fashioned a tourniquet around her arm from what looked like her own jacket sleeve. Blood ran down her face from a scalp wound. 11 other humans fought alongside her. They moved with disturbing efficiency, covering angles, reloading while others fired, never wasting ammunition. There was no elegance in their movements, no honor, just brutal, practical violence designed solely for survival and killing. A wave of Ravagers charged through the narrow choke point. Chen shot 4 before they got close, then used the metal shard to stab a 5th. Another human triggered something that made a support beam collapse, crushing 3 more. A third human threw what appeared to be a sealed container of ship fuel with an igniter attached. The explosion was deafening. The Ravagers fell back, their assault broken by the improvised defenses. "Ambassador Chen," Thyra called out. Chen turned. Blood and chemical burns covered her face, but she smiled when she saw Thyra. "Ambassador Thyra." "Good timing. We were starting to run low on amusing ways to kill them." "Starting to run low?" Thyra felt her translator struggle with the casual phrasing. "You have been fighting for nearly an hour. Has it been that long?" Chen looked at one of her soldiers. "Corporal Davis, check the time." A young human woman glanced at her wrist device. 53 minutes, Ambassador." "Huh, felt longer." Chen leaned against the barricade, keeping her weapon pointed at the corridor. She pulled out a water container and drank slowly. Thyra could not reconcile what she was witnessing. This woman had just fought a battle that should have killed her 10 times over, and she was drinking water as if taking a break from paperwork. "How?" Thyra asked. "How are you still alive?" The mathematical probability of survival was nearly 0. Chen considered the question seriously, as she always did. "We made it mathematically expensive for them to kill us. That is the key, Ambassador. You change the equation, make the cost too high, and eventually they decide to spend their resources elsewhere. That is not how warfare functions. That is not how mathematics works. It is how humans work." Chen gestured at the improvised defenses. "We are not good at stand-up fights, Ambassador. Our armor is weaker, our weapons less advanced, our bodies more fragile. But we excel at making life miserable for anyone trying to kill us. It is a specialized skill set." Karn had accompanied Thyra. The young attaché stared at the scene with all eye stalks fully extended. "You weaponized the ship itself. You turned our own vessel against the invaders. Everything is a weapon if you are creative enough," Chen agreed, "and humans are very, very creative when our lives depend on it." Before Thyra could respond, her comm implant activated. "Ambassador, Ravager forces are massing for another assault on your position. Heavy numbers detected. We count approximately 90 hostiles converging on Junction 15 Gamma." Chen stood, wincing as she put weight on her injured leg. "How long until they arrive?" 3 minutes, maybe 4. The humans at the junction exchanged glances. Thyra expected fear. Instead, they began checking ammunition counts and adjusting their barricades. "You cannot fight 90 Ravagers," Thyra said. "Even humans cannot overcome those odds." "Probably not," Chen admitted. "But we can slow them down, buy time for the colony evacuation to complete. That is worth doing. That is suicide. That is not a sustainable tactical option." Corporal Davis spoke up. She was young, barely looked old enough for military service. "With respect, Ambassador, suicide implies we do not expect to survive. We always expect to survive. We are just not very good at calculating realistic survival probabilities. It is a species-wide blind spot." Despite the situation, despite the horror, Thyra felt something that might have been amusement. "You are insane. All of you. We get that a lot." Chen checked her plasma cutter. It was nearly depleted. "Ambassador Thyra, you should return to the bridge. This corridor is about to become extremely dangerous." "No." Thyra surprised herself with the firmness of her own voice. "You stayed for our wounded. We will stay for you. That is honor." Chen's expression shifted. For the first time, Thyra saw genuine respect in the human's eyes. "All right then. Ambassador, have your guards set up behind those barricades. When the Ravagers come, let them get close before engaging. We are low on ammunition, so make every shot count. You give orders very directly for a diplomat. Would you prefer I submit a formal request with proper diplomatic phrasing?" "We can do that, but we only have 2 minutes before the Ravagers arrive." Thyra found herself clicking in what her species considered laughter. "Give your orders, Ambassador. We will follow them." The Ravagers came like a living nightmare. Their forms were deliberately horrifying, the result of genetic modification and cybernetic enhancement designed to terrorize prey. They shrieked and howled as they charged, a psychological weapon as much as a physical one. Thyra fired her weapon in controlled bursts, as she had been trained. Beside her, the humans fired in short, vicious patterns. They aimed for joints and weak points, making every shot disable or kill. The Ravagers reached the barricades. Close combat began. Thyra fought with the traditional techniques of her people, her movements precise and honorable. She saw Davis fighting with no technique at all. The young human punched, kicked, bit, head-butted, and used every part of her body as a weapon. It was chaos. It was ugly. It was devastatingly effective. A ravager 4 times Davis's size went down, its throat torn open by a piece of sharp metal the human had concealed in her glove. Beside Thyra, a human soldier, whose name she did not know, was badly wounded. A ravager blade had penetrated his armor. He was dying. He knew it. Thyra could see the knowledge in his eyes. The human looked up at the damaged power conduit above him. He looked at the massive ravagers pushing through the junction. Then he jumped, grabbing the exposed wiring and pulling it down into the crowd of enemies. The electricity arced through the ravagers like lightning. The human died instantly, his hand fused to the cable. But 23 ravagers died with him. The assault broke, the survivors scrambling backward over their own dead. No. Thyra felt something crack inside her chest. This was not how combat should function. This was not honorable or right. His name was Marcus Washington, Chen said quietly beside her. He had 2 siblings back on Earth. Remember him, Ambassador. Remember that he chose this, that he calculated the exchange rate and decided it was worthwhile. The Ravager advance stalled completely. The survivors retreated, unwilling to face more losses in what had become a killing ground. Silence fell over the junction. Thyra counted the bodies. 12 humans had held this position. Now, 9 remained standing. They had faced 90 Ravagers. 64 Ravager corpses lay in the corridor. This violates every principle of military mathematics, Thyra whispered. No, Chen said, finally allowing herself to sit. This is human mathematics. We calculate exchanges differently. We factor in variables your equations ignore. Desperation, creativity, and spite are powerful multipliers. Reinforcements arrived. Medical teams rushed forward. Thyra watched as the humans were carried away. They were still joking with each other, still smiling. One of them asked if anyone had saved his favorite knife. Thyra stood in the blood-stained corridor and felt her worldview shatter. The analysis was wrong. The mathematics was incomplete. The humans were not weak. They were something else entirely. She looked at Chen as medics treated the ambassador's wounds. Why? Thyra asked. Why fight like that? Why not retreat when logic demanded it? Why not follow the rational choice? Chen met her eyes steadily. Because we are human, Ambassador. And humans have a fundamental flaw in our cognitive architecture. We cannot accept defeat. It is a psychological inability, possibly a genetic defect. 3 million years of evolution, and we still have not learned that some things are impossible. By the time we figure it out, the impossible thing is already done. Or you are dead, Thyra said softly. Or that. Chen agreed. The line is narrower than you think. The medical bay of the Diamond Fortress was overwhelmed with wounded. Kethian and human personnel lay side by side, being treated by medical staff from both species. Thyra walked through the rows, her mind still processing what she had witnessed. She found Karn sitting beside a human bed. The young attaché had been spending more time with the human contingent since the alliance formed. Thyra had disapproved initially. Now she was less certain of her judgment. Ambassador. Karn stood quickly. At ease, attaché. Thyra looked at the human in the bed. It was Davis, the young corporal who had fought like a feral creature. Her torso was wrapped in regenerative bandages. Monitors tracked her vital signs, but she was conscious and, impossibly, she was smiling. Good fight, Ambassador, Davis said. Her voice was weak but steady. You nearly died. Yes, ma'am. But I did not. That is the important part. Thyra studied the young woman's face. She appeared barely mature enough for military service. How old are you, Corporal? 21 standard years, ma'am. How many combat situations have you experienced? Davis had to think. 5, maybe 6. Hard to keep count. They blur together. You should be terrified. Young soldiers always are. Oh, I'm terrified, Davis said cheerfully. Every single time. But fear is just data, ma'am. It informs your decisions, but it does not make them for you. The Ravagers were still there. The job still needed doing. So you do it scared. Karn spoke quietly. I asked them, Ambassador, why they fight even when afraid, why they do not retreat when logic demands it. Corporal Davis told me something I have been thinking about ever since. What did she say? Davis explained it better than I can. Karn's eye stalks swiveled toward the human. Tell her what you told me, about the persistence hunt. Davis nodded slowly. Back on Earth, before we developed technology, humans hunted by just walking after prey. We were not fast enough to catch them in a sprint, not strong enough to overpower them. But we could walk. We could keep walking. We would follow an animal for days. It would run. We would walk. It would hide. We would find it. It would fight. We would outlast it. Eventually, the prey would literally collapse from exhaustion. Its body would give out because it could not understand something that just kept coming, kept pursuing, never stopped. She looked at Thyra. That is humans, Ambassador. We are persistence predators. We are not impressive in any single moment, but we are terrifying over time because we do not stop. Ever. It is built into our DNA. Thyra felt cold settle into her organs. And you apply this to warfare. We apply it to everything, Davis said. Warfare, diplomacy, science, art. We just keep pushing until we break through or die trying. Usually we break through. Thyra left the medical bay and returned to her quarters. She needed to understand. She activated her research terminal and began pulling files on human history. What she found disturbed her more than the combat had. Humans had fought wars that lasted generations. They had conflicts where casualties numbered in the millions. They had sieges that continued for years. She read about a city called Leningrad that held out through 900 days of siege, 900 days of starvation, bombardment, and disease, 900 days when surrender would have been logical. The city did not surrender. She found records of resistance movements that continued decades after the original conflict ended, of rebels who fought with no hope of victory simply because they refused to stop fighting, of last stands where humans died to the last person rather than accept defeat. But what disturbed her most was not the combat. It was how humans treated surrender itself. In Kethian culture, surrender was a calculated decision. When the mathematics turned against you, you surrendered to preserve resources. It was rational, efficient, honorable. Humans viewed surrender as something approaching moral failure. They had phrases for it: never give up, never surrender, death before dishonor. They built monuments to defeats where everyone died rather than quit. They celebrated last stands and hopeless battles. They turned military disasters into cultural legends because the soldiers had refused to surrender. It was insane. It was illogical. It was terrifying. Thyra found a historical document. An ancient human general had been asked about his strategy against a superior force. His response was simple: I will attack them before they realize they should attack me. When they counterattack, I will attack harder. When they try to defend, I will attack their defense. When they retreat, I will pursue. When they surrender, I will accept nothing less than their unconditional submission. I will not stop until victory is achieved or I am dead. That philosophy had not changed in 3,000 years of human civilization. They still fought that way. Chen fought that way. Davis fought that way. They all did. A chime at her door interrupted her research. Enter. High Councilor Vex entered. The elder diplomat looked exhausted. The colony evacuation was complete, and the ravagers had been driven off. The cost had been high, but they had won. Ambassador Thyra, I need your analysis of the human performance during the engagement. Thyra chose her words carefully. They fought effectively. Casualties were high, but within acceptable parameters considering the odds they faced. That is not what I asked. Vex settled into a seat without waiting for invitation. I asked for your analysis, your honest evaluation of our new allies. Thyra felt her secondary hearts racing. They are dangerous, High Counselor, more dangerous than our intelligence suggested, more dangerous than they appear, perhaps more dangerous than they themselves fully realize. Explain. Thyra pulled up the combat data. By every mathematical model we possess, the human forces should have been annihilated. They were outnumbered, outgunned, fighting in an environment not designed for their physiology. They should have retreated, regrouped, followed standard tactical doctrine. Instead, they held positions that should have been overrun in minutes. They held for an hour, multiple hours in some cases. Vex's eye stalks focused intently. What is your conclusion? Humans do not calculate warfare the way we do. They factor in variables we do not consider. Creativity, adaptability, and something I can only describe as psychological inability to accept defeat. They fight past the point where logic says they should stop. And somehow, impossibly, they win. The counselor was silent for a long moment. 32 years ago, he finally said, there was a border incident, barely worth mentioning in our historical records. But there were 5 human observers attached to one of our survey stations. When raiders attacked, our personnel evacuated as per protocol. The humans stayed. They said someone needed to delay the raiders and they volunteered. Thyra leaned forward. What happened? We estimated they would buy us 1 hour. They bought us 4 days. 4 days, Ambassador. 5 humans against a raiding force of 140. When we retook the station, 3 humans were still alive. Barely. They were out of ammunition, out of supplies, out of rational options, and they were still fighting with improvised weapons, with pieces of the station itself, with their bare hands when nothing else remained. That is when I understood, Vex continued. Humans do not fight because they calculate victory as probable. They fight because they are human, and humans do not surrender. It is psychological, perhaps genetic. They literally cannot quit. The stories are real, Thyra said softly. The stories do not go far enough, Vex corrected. I have kept this observation classified for 3 decades because I feared our people would not believe me, or worse, that they would believe and panic. But you have seen it now. You have witnessed it firsthand. What am I supposed to do with this information? Vex stood to leave. The Ravagers are regrouping. Intelligence suggests they will launch another assault larger than before. High Command wants us to establish defensive positions and wait for reinforcements. And the humans want to attack first. They call it a preemptive strike. High Command thinks it is suicide. Vex paused at the door. But I remember those 3 humans in that station. I remember what they did when they should have died. So I'm not certain it is suicide. I think it might be something else. What? Human logic, which might be more frightening than suicide. After Vex left, Thyra returned to her research. She found interviews with human soldiers. One passage made her pause. A veteran of multiple conflicts was asked why humans fought so fiercely. The response was haunting. We are not trying to be heroes. We are just trying to survive. But humans have been surviving for so long, through so many extinction events, that survival is all we know how to do. So when faced with something that should kill us, we do the only thing we know. We survive it too. We do not know any other way.